It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when I met Walter for the first time. 73 years old, a retired postal worker with 2 grown children living on opposite coasts. His handshake was firm, but there was a kind of stillness in his eyes, a quiet that spoke louder than words. He sat down, looked around the room, and said softly, "I'm not here because something's broken. I'm here because I feel like I'm disappearing." That sentence sat between us for a while. And I didn't rush to fill the silence. Because I knew exactly what he meant. That feeling of drifting through the day, doing what needs to be done, but not feeling seen. Not feeling touched. Not feeling like your presence in the world is making a dent in anything anymore. It's not pain in the joints or poor circulation that wears a man down after 60, it's the ache of invisibility. Walter was healthy. All his labs looked fine. His blood pressure was controlled. But he felt empty. Like the spark had quietly gone out sometime between his retirement and his wife's passing. And as we talked, a pattern began to emerge, one I've heard more times than I can count. The world had stopped asking anything from him. No deadlines, no late nights, no real sense of urgency. And in that vacuum came loneliness. Then came sleep trouble. And then came the heavy, slow slide into what we often label simply as just getting old. But it wasn't age. It was disconnection. That's when I asked him a question he didn't expect. "Walter," I said gently, "do you still experience physical release, on your own, I mean? Do you take time for yourself in that way?" He blinked, shuffled in his seat, then half smiled with a mix of embarrassment and curiosity. "You mean, do I still masturbate?" I nodded. He lowered his voice. "Not really. It just doesn't feel right anymore. Doesn't feel necessary." And right there, that moment of truth, is where this conversation begins. Because what Walter thought was unnecessary, what he believed he had aged out of, was actually one of the simplest, most direct ways his body could begin to heal from the very thing he was struggling with: emotional heaviness, isolation, and the creeping numbness of depression. Now, I know this may come as a surprise. Most of us were never taught to connect sexual release with emotional wellness. For many, masturbation has always lived in the shadows, spoken about in hushed tones or not at all. And after 60, it's often dismissed entirely. Seen as juvenile. Unimportant. Something you should have left behind with your younger years. But here's what the science, and years of practice with men like Walter, have shown me: masturbation, done mindfully and without shame, is one of the most accessible, natural ways to fight off depression and loneliness in the golden years. Not because it's a distraction. Not because it's a substitute for connection. But because it reconnects you to yourself. Let's break that down. When you engage in intentional self-pleasure, your body responds with a cascade of neurochemical changes. As arousal builds, dopamine levels begin to rise. Dopamine is the brain's anticipation chemical. It gives you focus, drive, the sense that something good is coming. And for many older adults dealing with depression, it's this exact system that begins to dull. Days blur together. Nothing feels exciting. But even a short period of arousal can wake that system up again, remind your brain what it's like to look forward to something. Then, during climax, something beautiful happens. The brain releases a surge of oxytocin, often called the cuddle hormone. This isn't just feel-good fluff. Oxytocin lowers cortisol, the stress hormone that fuels anxiety and sadness. It helps regulate blood pressure. It even improves sleep. And in the moments after orgasm, endorphins flood your system, easing pain, calming your mind, and wrapping your nervous system in a soft exhale you may not have felt in weeks. Now imagine doing that not once, but regularly. With intention. With compassion for yourself instead of shame. That's what I invited Walter to explore, not out of desperation, but out of curiosity. I asked him to consider this part of his body not as something left over from a younger man, but as a vital piece of the puzzle in reclaiming his mental health. I told him he didn't need to chase arousal. He didn't need to feel anything specific. He just needed to begin, gently. Slowly. As if returning to a familiar place he hadn't visited in years. He agreed. Not entirely comfortably. but with a kind of quiet hope I've come to recognize. And over the next few weeks, something shifted. He called me after his third week into the new practice. "I didn't expect it," he said, "but it feels like I can breathe again. I wake up and I'm not dreading the day. And I think I'm even sleeping better. That's not a miracle. That's biology remembering how to work in your favor. That's what happens when you remind your body it still matters. That pleasure is still allowed. That sensation isn't off limits. That even in solitude, you can find connection, first with yourself, and then, more easily, with others. Because here's the truth most people don't tell you. The absence of touch, especially over time, rewires the brain in subtle but powerful ways. It dulls your sensory circuits. It reduces your capacity for joy. It tricks your nervous system into thinking that stimulation is gone for good, and with it, the motivation to engage with the world. But masturbation, practiced gently, mindfully, can reverse that process. It wakes your brain up again. It reminds your senses that you're still here. Still capable. Still deserving of warmth, of pleasure, of comfort. In part 2, I'll walk you deeper into this path, how emotional numbness begins to lift through consistent practice, how physical pleasure leads to better sleep, sharper memory, and more stable moods. And how, for many men, masturbation after 60 becomes not just a private act, but a profound tool for reconnecting with life itself. So stay with me. Because the science is just the beginning. The transformation is what comes next. When Walter returned to my office 6 weeks later, something about him had changed. It wasn't dramatic. His hair hadn't suddenly grown thicker, nor had his steps grown faster. But the heaviness, the almost invisible weight that had been clinging to his shoulders the first time we met, was no longer there. Instead, there was a softness in his voice, a quiet steadiness in his breathing. He wasn't just feeling better. He was reconnecting, to himself, to his body, and in the most important way, to the life he had quietly been drifting away from. And as we spoke, he admitted something that stuck with me long after that appointment. "It's not just that I'm doing it again," he said. "It's the way I'm thinking about it. I'm not doing it because I'm bored or lonely or restless. I'm doing it because it reminds me I still feel." That's the piece we often miss. For decades, masturbation has been boxed into two narrow categories, physical release or shameful indulgence. But what if it's neither? What if it's medicine? What if it's a form of emotional maintenance, like therapy for your nervous system, like a conversation between your body and your brain that says, "We're still alive, and we still care about being here"? Let me walk you through the biological truth of what happens when you begin engaging in this practice regularly, especially after 60, when many men feel their emotional health is slowly slipping through their fingers. We've already talked about dopamine, oxytocin, and endorphins. But beyond those feel-good chemicals, something else powerful takes place, neuroplasticity. That's the brain's ability to adapt, rewire, and change how it responds to certain inputs. And emotional numbness, what we sometimes call low-grade depression or blunted affect, is often the result of sensory understimulation over time. You see, when your days are predictable, your social interactions decrease, and your body receives less physical sensation, your brain actually starts to turn down the volume on pleasure pathways. Not because anything is broken, but because the body adapts. It thinks, if we're not using this system, it must not be needed anymore. And that's when joy becomes harder to access. Music sounds flat. Food tastes dull. The days feel gray, even when the sun is out. Now, here's where masturbation becomes a tool, not for escape, but for reactivation. When you touch yourself, gently, consciously, without judgment, you're not just stimulating skin. You're reactivating the sensory circuits that tie pleasure to presence. You're reminding your brain that sensation matters. That your body isn't just surviving, but engaging with the world again. Over time, this builds momentum. The more you stimulate those pathways, the more responsive they become. You laugh more easily. You sleep more deeply. Your mood stabilizes. And most importantly, you begin to want to engage with the world again, not because someone told you to, but because your body is guiding you back toward life. Walter described it perfectly. He said, "It's like I can feel the difference between being alone and being lonely now. And that's new. And that's where the emotional power lies. Because one of the most dangerous parts of aging, especially for men, is the quiet slide into isolation. You stop calling old friends. You avoid gatherings because you don't want to answer uncomfortable questions. You sleep later, eat less, stop taking care of your appearance. And slowly, the distance between you and the life you used to love grows wider and wider. But when you reintroduce pleasure into your routine, deliberately and without guilt, you build a bridge back. A small one, at first, but strong. And the beautiful thing is, this bridge doesn't rely on anyone else. You don't need a partner. You don't need permission. You just need your own willingness to begin again. And if you're wondering, what if I don't feel anything anymore? What if it's been so long that my body doesn't respond? Let me say this, that's okay. That's normal. And it's not permanent. Many men come to this practice after years, sometimes decades, of disconnection. Their bodies are slower to respond, and their minds are filled with judgment. Why bother? Is this pathetic? Shouldn't I be past this? These thoughts are common, but they are not truth. The truth is, the body remembers. It may take time. It may feel unfamiliar. But it never forgets how to receive kindness. How to respond to care. And that's why I always recommend starting with presence, not performance. You don't need to climax the first time. Or the second. Or even the third. What matters is that you're showing up. That you're sending your body a new message, you matter. I'm listening now. Walter took that to heart. He said, some nights, I just breathe and put my hands on my chest. That alone feels like a start. And it is a start. Because what you're building isn't just sensation, it's trust. Between you and the body you've lived in for decades. A body that has carried you through hardship, heartbreak, illness, and joy. A body that has never stopped fighting for you, even when you stopped paying attention to it. And as that trust rebuilds, your emotional world begins to open up again. Your nervous system learns to regulate itself. Your parasympathetic system, the one responsible for rest, repair, and digestion, becomes more dominant. You begin to feel calmer. More in control. Less reactive to daily stress. You cry more easily, but also laugh more freely. You stop gripping so tightly. You breathe again. This isn't about sex. This isn't about youth. This is about coming home. And once you've returned to that place, something else often happens. You begin to reach out again. You start calling old friends. You start making plans. You show up to life not because someone dragged you, but because you want to be there. And that want, that desire, is the opposite of depression. It's the seed of aliveness. In part 3, we'll talk about exactly how to keep this practice sustainable, not just physically, but emotionally. We'll explore how this habit can evolve into a personal ritual of care, how to navigate shame if it resurfaces, and how this one small act might just be the beginning of the most connected chapter of your life yet. So stay with me. Because what comes next isn't just about information, it's about transformation. And your body is ready. All it's waiting for is you. Let's take a breath together before we continue. Because if you've made it this far, if you've allowed yourself to open even a little to this conversation, then you've already done something brave. You faced a subject that's been kept in the dark for far too long. And more importantly, you've started walking towards something that isn't about fixing yourself or fighting your age. It's about embracing what's still alive, still warm, still quietly waiting inside you. So now the question becomes, how do you make this last? How do you turn this spark, this rediscovered connection between your body and your spirit, into a regular part of your life? Especially in a world that rarely affirms or encourages older men to explore their own pleasure with gentleness and pride? It starts with changing the story you tell yourself. You are not broken. You are not past your prime. You are not embarrassing. You are not silly or selfish for wanting to feel good in your own skin. What you are, is human. Fully, beautifully, vulnerably human. And part of being human, at any age, is recognizing that intimacy and touch are not luxuries. They are essential nutrients for your emotional well-being. So begin by treating this practice the way you treat any form of self-care. Not as a guilty indulgence, but as something you do to nourish your nervous system, your immune system, your mood, your confidence. That means creating space for it. Not rushing. Not hiding. Not brushing it off like it's just a biological itch to scratch. Let it be something sacred, even if it's just 10 or 15 minutes before bed. Dim the lights. Slow your breath. Allow your body to guide you. Let go of expectation. And instead, listen. Some nights, that release might come easily. Other nights, it might not. But every time you engage with yourself mindfully, you are doing something most men never dare to do. You are reclaiming ownership of your emotional life. And as you continue this practice, something remarkable starts to happen. Your body begins to trust you again. Your nervous system becomes more stable. Your moods soften. The nights don't feel as long. You wake up with a sense of groundedness that wasn't there before. And maybe, just maybe, you stop feeling quite so alone, not because someone else suddenly walked into your life, but because you did. That's what Walter discovered. By the third month of his new practice, he wasn't just sleeping better or feeling less flat. He was smiling more. He started volunteering at the local community center, leading a walking group for other retired men. He even started dating, not seriously, but openly. "I'm not looking for someone to save me," he told me with a grin. "I'm already showing up for myself." And that, truly, is the transformation I wish for every man watching this. Not to become someone else. Not to go back in time. But to feel present in the body you live in now. To feel like you belong to yourself again. Like you're not just going through the motions of surviving, but remembering how to live. Now, if shame creeps in, and it might, greet it with compassion. Remember, shame is usually an echo. It doesn't come from your truth. It comes from someone else's silence, someone else's fear, someone else's rules that you no longer need to follow. You don't have to feel ashamed for touching yourself. For wanting warmth. For needing release. You are allowed to meet your own needs. In fact, I would argue, you must. Because emotional health after 60 is not just about keeping your mind sharp. It's about keeping your heart open. And self-pleasure, practiced with tenderness, can be the doorway to that openness. It reconnects you to your senses. It softens the walls that isolation builds. It helps you remember that joy doesn't have to come from outside. It can begin with your own breath, your own skin, your own presence. And once you've built that foundation, everything else becomes easier. You're more likely to seek out meaningful connection. To call that friend you haven't spoken to in a while. To join that class you were hesitant about. To sit in the sun and feel it again, not just on your skin, but in your chest. In your soul. Because loneliness isn't just the absence of people. It's the absence of connection. And connection, my friend, begins within. When you care for yourself in this way, you stop waiting for the world to hand you meaning. You create it, gently, one moment at a time. So if you're still wondering whether this practice is worth it, let me say this as clearly as I can: yes. It is. Not because it's trendy or scientific or rebellious. But because you are worth being cared for, by your own hands, your own kindness, your own intention. And if this video has helped you take even one step toward that truth, then I ask just one thing. Click the like button. It helps bring this message to other men who are silently carrying the same questions you once had. Leave a comment. You don't have to share anything private, just let someone else know they're not alone in this. That they're not strange, or broken, or forgotten. And finally, subscribe to this channel. Because we're just getting started. There are so many more conversations to be had about what it means to thrive, not just survive, after 60. About health, vitality, intimacy, and the quiet power of returning home to your own life. Until next time, take care of your mind. Take care of your body. And above all, take care of the man who's still inside you. He hasn't gone anywhere. He's just been waiting for you to come back.